Okay, so this video is going to take you through a few examples of how to form verbs in the perfect tense, how to conjugate them. So you need to have watched the introductory video on the perfect tense to understand how it works. Arguably one of the harder tenses because there's so many different parts to remember, although essentially if you've learnt the verbs être and avoir in the present tense, it's really, really easy. However, if you're starting out, this flowchart can give you a bit of direction. Essentially, there are two main parts to this. You need to know whether your verb takes être or avoir. If you remember, there are three parts to the perfect tense. There's the person, like je. There's the auxiliary verb, like the suis. And then there's the past participle, like aller, je suis allé, I went. And some of the verbs, most of them, take avoir, like j'ai joué, I played. So we need to know whether it's a je suis or a j'ai, an être or an avoir. And that decision comes down to whether the verb is reflexive, so whether there is a se with the infinitive, or whether it's one of those that are in the list of verbs that take être that you just have to know, and we refer to those as the Damn Smart Perv list, or Mrs. Van der Tramp, or some other way of making the initial letters into a memorable word. And once we've got part of être or avoir, we need to make the past participle. And we need to check first to see whether it's irregular, and we can check those in dictionaries or learning mats, because some of them we just have to learn. And if it's regular, then there are three possible endings: E accent, E acute for the ER verbs, I and U, the IR and RE verbs. The last little bit that lots of people forget, if you've used être as your auxiliary, if it's reflexive or Damn Smart Perv, then the past participle agrees if it's feminine or plural, so it might add an E or an S. Okay, we're going to have a go at these five. So if you're feeling confident, you might want to pause the video and have a go at those five by yourself. If not, we'll work through and show you how to do it. So, first starting point, as always, is the infinitive. So you need to find to work. And you can look that up in a dictionary, or just remember that on the back of the Foundation Tier Learning Map, there are a few examples. So here we can see travailler is to work. So that is our starting point. And if it's on the back there, it saves us a few seconds in looking words up in dictionaries. So once we've got to work, our first question is, does it take être or avoir? We notice there's no se, it's not reflexive. If you compare it to se réveiller, that is a reflexive verb because it's got the se. Travailler doesn't, so we know it's not reflexive. So we go to the higher tier learning map now, and we check to see if it's one of the Damn Smart Perv verbs. There is a T in Damn Smart Perv, but that T stands for tomber, so we know we're using avoir. So we're over here for the present tense of avoir, and we want the we form. We have worked, which is the same as we worked. So nous avons is our starting point. Nous avons. Now the second part is to turn to work into the past participle worked. Check the back of the learning mat to see whether travailler is one of the irregular verbs. It's not there. That doesn't mean it's not irregular, it just means it's not one of the most common ones, because I couldn't possibly put all of them on the back of the learning mat. There are loads. However, if you want to be doubly sure, you'd need to check in a dictionary or an online resource. However, travailler is regular, so we need to find out what ending goes on the end, and therefore we look at the grid. We're in the perfect tense, and we've got an ER verb, so we're in this grid here. we can look straight to we played. There's our nous avons, and the jouer ends in an e acute. So the er has come off the infinitive and an e acute added. So we need to do exactly the same to our travailler. Take off the er and put on the e acute. And we're done. Nous avons travaillé literally means we have worked. And in French, we have worked and we worked are exactly the same, because where we've got two forms, they've only got the one perfect tense. So, same process now for I showed. This one's not on the back of the learning mat, so you'd have to look it up. However, I'll save us a bit of time and tell you it's montrer. Okay, so once we've got montrer, we need to do exactly the same thing as we did before. We can already see there's no s, we know it's not reflexive. But there is an M, there's two M's in damn smart perv, so we need to check the back of the learning mat to see whether it's montrer. And at first glance you think it is, but when you look a bit closer, you see there's no R there, and that's not montrer, it's monter. I climbed or I went up, not I showed. So it's not in damn smart perv, that's not the same one. So that means we're using avoir because the other M stands for mort, I died. I showed we want, so we shouldn't have to look at the learning mat for I have, but it's there if we do. So we need j'ai. Oops. And now we need the past participle of montrer. So again, we need to check the learning mat to see whether it's irregular. It's not. So again, we're comparing to jouer because it's an er verb. So just like travailler, the ending is going to be the e acute. Take off the er and add the e acute. J'ai montré means I showed or I have showed. End of story. Gets a little bit different now with she left. To leave is partir. There are several verbs to leave in different contexts. If you said she left the house, you'd need to use quitter. But if you just said and she left, full stop, end of story, then partir is the one we want. And that's the one I'm going to use. Or you could use quitter if your sentence explained what it was she left. Now, partir. Straight away we can see it's not reflexive, there's no s. However, if we look on the higher tier learning mat, we can see it is in damn smart perv. Je suis parti means I left. So we know this time we're not using avoir, we're using être. And we can see that because I left is je suis parti. Literally, I am left is what it would translate as word for word, although that makes no sense in English. That's how they say it in French. And straight away we've got the past participle. We can see parti is the past participle, and that makes sense because partir is an IR verb, and if we compare it to the one in the grid, finir, we've got past participle j'ai fini ending in an I. So that makes sense for the past participle, so we'll put that in straight away. Just take the R off and we've got the past participle. Now, we need the she form of je suis, she form of être, which is elle est. Okay, so that's our auxiliary done as well. And there we go. Elle est partie, she left. Except it's not done, because there's one little stage left to remember if we used être as our auxiliary. If we used je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont, any of those. And that, we need to make it agree. And that is hinted to us by the E in brackets on the back of the learning mat. Because if that je is female, we'd need to put an E on. And because she is always female, we will always need an E on she left. Elle est partie, like that. And now we're done. They lost. Let's start with the infinitive. To lose is perdre, and that needs to come out of the dictionary. So, same question. There's no se, it's not reflexive. So, we need to check, is it in dam smart perv? Well, we know it isn't, because we know that the only P in dam smart perv stood for partir, to leave. So we didn't really need to look that up. If we'd have thought about it, we'd have realised it wasn't there. So our auxiliary again is avoir. And they left, we'll need they have for that. Ils ont. So that's our first stage, done really quickly. And now we need the past participle. Okay, so we're noting, before we go into the learning map, we're noting it's an RE verb this time. But before we look at the grid, we need to check our list of irregular verbs, and lose is not there. So we're back over to the grid, and perfect tense, RE verbs, we're in this bottom grid here, and we're looking for the they form, and we can see there's the they have, ils ont, and the past participle, there you go, ends in U. The RE of vendre, to sell, has changed to a U. So that's exactly what we're going to do with perdre. Take off the RE and put on a U. Because we've used avoir, ils ont, and not être, we don't need to make it agree. So we're finished. Ils ont perdu. They lost. Last one then. You entered. We're going to start with the infinitive, which is entrer, means to enter. And we note before we go that we have got the plural you. So we're imagining we're talking to a lot of people. And we need to check whether it's dam smart perv to start off, because it's not reflexive. So the only other possibility of it being taking être is it being on this list. And we see quite quickly that it's there. Je suis entré means I entered. So we do need to use être, just like we did with I left. So we can look, the past participles already given to us. It's got the E acute, as we would expect of an ER verb. Oops. So we can take off the ER and put on the E acute, just like with montrer and travailler. Now we need the auxiliary verb. We're reminded that it's the U form of je suis, which is over here with our être in the present tense. We've got two U's, tu and vous, but we remember it said plural, so we need the vous form, vous êtes. And we need to make sure that we don't forget the circumflex. And there we go. And if we remember, there's one more stage with these verbs that take être, and we get the reminder from the E in brackets. Now, this needs to agree with the U. We know that we're talking to more than one person because it's plural. So we're going to put an S on the end. However, it's possible that there are only girls in this group. Because we have just got this random part of sentence, we haven't got any context. But if you were using this in real life, you'd know whether you were talking about a group of girls or a mixed group or a group of males only. So you'd know which one to use. But it is possible that we would need to put an extra E on before that S. And that would be if we were talking to just a group of females. Vous êtes entré. So there are two possibilities for that one, depending on who you're talking to. Okay, hopefully I've taken you through enough different examples there to make you feel a little bit more confident about how to do this on your own.